As Israel's conflict with Iran escalated over the weekend, so did fears for global oil prices. Crude settled 7% higher on Friday as news of the conflict first broke. It then gained another 1.5% in early trade Monday, before easing back from initial highs. That left international benchmark Brent crude at around $75 per barrel. Over the weekend, Israeli strikes hit a major oil facility near Tehran. But for traders, the key concern is whether Iran will try to disrupt oil supplies as part of its response to the attacks. About a fifth of the world's total crude consumption passes through the Strait of Hormuz, a narrow shipping lane between Iran and Oman. Iranian media quoted one of the country's lawmakers as saying closure of the strait was being seriously considered. One analyst told Reuters that any such blockade could rapidly add $20 per barrel to oil prices. The tensions have also sparked fears of supply shortages, when only a few weeks ago the big worry was oversupply. Though major producers, including Saudi Arabia, do have the capacity to increase output if needed, traders say the market could be left with very little spare capacity. That could make oil prices vulnerable to any further escalation of the conflict or other new shock. For now, any hopes of a quick end to the fighting look forlorn, with both sides keeping up attacks. Iran has said it won't negotiate a ceasefire while the Israeli air assaults continue.
At the moment, I can say that we're talking about dozens. We don't have an accurate number right now. There are also fatalities on this site. Israel and Iran launched fresh attacks on each other overnight into Sunday, killing scores. That's as US President Donald Trump said the conflict could be ended easily, while warning Tehran not to strike any US targets. Iran says dozens have been killed in Israel's onslaught since Friday, including 60 on Saturday, half of whom were children, when a missile brought down a Tehran apartment block. More than a dozen people have been killed in Israel and hundreds injured since Iran launched its retaliatory attacks. On Sunday, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu visited a residential area in the city of Bat Yam, hit by an overnight Iranian missile onslaught. He watched as rescue efforts searching for missing people buried under the rubble of a collapsed multi-story building continued. Netanyahu said Iran will, quote, pay a heavy price for civilian deaths. The Israeli military has warned Iranians living near weapons facilities to evacuate after both Netanyahu and Trump said Israel's attacks would intensify. Trump has lauded Israel's offensive while denying Iranian allegations that the US has taken part in it. He warned Tehran not to widen its retaliation to include US facilities or interests. In a message on Truth Social, Trump added that the US could, quote, easily get a deal done between Iran and Israel and end this bloody conflict. An Iranian government spokesperson said on Sunday that the country had been ready to hold a sixth round of nuclear talks prior to Israel's initial strikes on Friday. The country's foreign minister has previously said that Iran was acting only in self-defense. The United States has been negotiating with Iran to try and secure a commitment to severely restrict its nuclear program, which Iran says is purely civilian. But Israel sees it as an existential threat because of its weapons potential. Trump gave no details of any possible deal.
Multiple people have been killed and homes destroyed as Iranian missiles struck Israel's Tel Aviv and the port city of Haifa before dawn on Monday. It prompted Israel's defense minister to warn Tehran residents would pay the price, and soon. Those comments were walked back later, with Israel saying it has no intention of causing deliberate harm to residents. Israel's National Emergency Services raised its death toll to at least 23 civilians since Friday. At least 100 more were wounded in Israel in the overnight blitz, part of the wave of attacks by Tehran in retaliation for Israel's strikes, which targeted Iran's nuclear and ballistic missile programs. Israeli attacks in Iran have killed at least 220 people since Friday, with 90% of the casualties reported to be civilians, Iran's health ministry has said. Several residential buildings in a densely populated Tel Aviv neighborhood were destroyed in a strike just a few hundred meters from the US Embassy branch in the city. The building sustained minor damage, and there were no injuries to US personnel. Fires were seen burning at a power plant near the Haifa port, media reported, with search and rescue operations underway, emergency authorities said. Iran's Revolutionary Guard said the latest attack employed a new method, causing Israel's multi-layered defense systems to target each other. It said it allowed Tehran to successfully hit many targets without providing further details. There were no reports in Israel of interceptor missiles hitting each other. Israel's military said on Monday it had struck again at command centers belonging to the Revolutionary Guard and Iran's military. Israel began the assault on Friday, wiping out the top echelon of Iran's military command and damaging its nuclear sites. It says the campaign will escalate in the coming days. Iran has vowed to, quote, open the gates of hell in retaliation. US President Donald Trump has repeatedly said Iran could end the war by agreeing to tough restrictions on its nuclear program. Iran says it is for peaceful purposes, but Western countries and the IAEA nuclear watchdog say it could be used to make an atomic bomb. Iran said its parliament was preparing a bill to leave the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, adding that Tehran remains opposed to developing weapons of mass destruction. Israel is presumed to have a sizable nuclear arsenal, but neither confirms nor denies it. It is the only Middle East state that has not signed the NPT.
Mixed data out of China on Monday offered temporary relief for the world's second-largest economy. Factory output growth hit a 6-month low in May, while retail sales picked up steam. It comes as China's economy strains under Donald Trump's tariff onslaught, as well as chronic weakness in the property sector. Industrial output grew 5.8% from a year earlier, the National Bureau of Statistics data showed. That missed analyst expectations for a 5.9% rise, and was the slowest growth since November last year. But retail sales got a boost, rising 6.4% and beating forecasts of just 5% expansion. All in all, though, the numbers failed to convince investors or analysts that anemic growth would pick up anytime soon. Chinese blue chips erased very brief gains in Monday trade. Data released earlier this month showed China's total exports expanded 4.8% in May, but outbound shipments to the US plunged 34.5%, the sharpest drop since February 2020.
We need responsible tourism, not mass tourism, but tourism that respects health, respects labor, respects dignity, and respects all of us who work in the tourism sector. Because what mass tourism brings us is poverty. We don't benefit from this kind of tourism.
Luxury car maker Jaguar Land Rover is cutting its outlook for the year as Donald Trump's tariffs bite. The UK firm on Monday lowered its profit margin forecast to 5 to 7% for the fiscal year. That's down from 10% earlier. Shares in Indian parent company Tata Motors dropped as much as 5% following the news. JLR says it is talking to the US and UK governments regarding a trade deal the pair agreed in May. That would allow the UK to export 100,000 cars per year to America at a 10% tariff, well below the 25% set for other nations. But details of the deal remain unclear, and not all of JLR's models would benefit. Its popular Defender SUV, for one, is made in Slovakia, which is in the EU and does not have a deal with Trump. Now JLR says it is assessing its options on prices. Analysts say its wealthy buyers may be a plus, if it means the firm's customers are not too concerned by any hikes. Since Trump announced his tariffs, JLR has been reallocating some cars to markets beyond the US to maintain profits. However, the company gets more than a quarter of its sales in the US, meaning there's no way to altogether avoid the impact of the tariffs. He's credited with turning around Renault, but now Luca De Meo is making his exit from the French car maker. Renault confirmed the news Sunday, saying he would be gone by mid-July. Later, France's Le Figaro newspaper said that De Meo was set to take over as chief executive of luxury group Kering, the owner of Gucci and other big brands. He will reportedly replace François-Henri Pinault, whose family controls the firm. Kering declined to comment on the report, but the move would come as the company faces pressure to deliver a turnaround, as it grapples with high debts and flagging sales. De Meo joined Renault in 2020, a year when it reported record losses. In the years since, he has cut jobs, costs and production capacity, making the company smaller but nimbler. He also oversaw the launch of strong-selling new cars, including a reinvention of the Model 5 hatchback. Of late, the firm has also been boosted by its focus on the European market, which leaves it well insulated from Donald Trump's sweeping global tariffs. Its shares are up around 90% over the period of De Meo's leadership. He also oversaw a reshaping of Renault's long-standing but often troubled relationship with Nissan. On Monday, the Nikkei newspaper said the Japanese firm planned to further reduce its stake in its French partner. The sale is expected to raise over $600 million, which Nissan will invest in developing new vehicles.
The Paris Air Show opened on Monday, but both the deadly Air India crash and the escalating Iran-Israel strikes are expected to cast a shadow. The four-day event showcases aircraft for the aerospace and defence industries every 2 years. And Boeing has scaled back its presence after a 787 crashed in India shortly after takeoff, killing over 240 people. Alexis Rocher is an aerospace journalist.
This will affect the atmosphere in general because accidents are never very good for the sector anyway. Even if they are rare today, they always remain spectacular, and it's especially difficult for Boeing, which is already facing immense difficulties. And this 787 accident only adds to them and further weakens this industry giant.
Investigators are gathering data on the Air India Boeing engine, wing flaps and landing gear, though it's too early to draw conclusions. That's according to a source familiar with the matter. India's aviation regulator has ordered safety checks on the airline's 787 fleet. The industry has also been shaken by missile strikes between Iran and Israel, which erupted on Friday. It's forced carriers to cancel or divert thousands of flights in the latest upheaval to travel in the region. Aerospace and defence executives are also grappling with uncertainty over US President Donald Trump's shifting tariff policies. Many say it has impacted aircraft, engines and parts and disrupted global supply chains, as well as driving up production costs and straining international partnerships.
U.S. President Donald Trump's administration is considering significantly expanding its travel restrictions by potentially banning citizens of 36 additional countries from entering the U.S. That's according to an internal State Department cable seen by Reuters, which outlined a dozen concerns about the countries in question and sought corrective action. The State Department did not immediately respond to requests for comment.
We don't want them
Earlier this month, Trump signed a proclamation that banned the entry of citizens from 12 countries as part of an immigration crackdown launched at the start of his second term. 7 of those initial 12 countries are in Africa. 24 of the 36 further countries now considered for an expanded travel ban are also on that continent. The cable, signed by Secretary of State Marco Rubio, raised the lack of a competent or cooperative government by some mentioned countries to produce reliable identity documents. Another was, quote, questionable security of a country's passport and concern around nationals of a country being involved in acts of terrorism in the U.S. or anti-Semitic and anti-American activity. The cable said some countries were not cooperative in facilitating the removal of their nationals from the U.S. who were ordered to be removed, and that nationals were overstaying their U.S. visas. The cable noted that not all of these concerns pertain to every country listed.